Hopefully the UFO community would accept the opinion of acclaimed ufologist and author of the Mothman prophecies, John Keel. I give thanks to Robert Gorman, whom without I would not have access to these letters. The following letter was written from John Keel to Robert Gorman on August 10, 1981. The purpose of this letter is to outline once and for all time my own observations and sometimes innocent involvement in the Allende affair. First, Morris K. Jessup personally regarded the Vero document as a joke. He openly scoffed at it. Shortly before his suicide, Jessup wrote a long, rambling letter to Long John Nebel, a New York radio personality, and similar letters to a few others including Hans Stefan Sanderson, editor of a science fiction magazine. These were typical pre-suicide letters of a depressive personality. While there are some odd things about the way the authorities in Florida behaved in handling his death, there is absolutely no doubt that Jessup ended his own life because of career setbacks and family problems. Just before he killed himself, he turned over his correspondence with Allende and his personal copy of the Vero document to Mr. Sanderson. He had made many notations of his own in the margins of the Vero book, all of them questioning the validity of A and B's comments, and generally ridiculing their efforts. He felt the whole thing was a waste of time and money, and that Allende was a mental case. In 1966, Sanderson turned over the Jessup file to Ivan Sanderson because the latter was writing Uninvited Visitors, a UFO book, and had been receiving letters from Mr. Allende. On a visit to Ivan's farm that year, I sat up all night reading this material with great fascination. My conclusion, like Jessup's, was that the Vero book was a work of a schizophrenic, a dual personality. Sometime in the late 1960s, I referred to Allende in some of my magazine articles. I soon began to receive letters from Mr. Allende himself. I was openly skeptical and asked him to prove his identity. He sent me photostats of his Siemens papers, tax records, and other documents, including a signed postcard he had received from Jessup. Around that time, he had visited the Lorenzens in Tucson, Arizona, and had spent an afternoon with them. He presented them with a copy of the Vero book and freely admitted to them that he had written all the annotations. In writing to me and describing his visit, he complained about Coral Lorenzen's legendary rudeness and claimed that she and her family left him sitting in the living room while they all went into the kitchen to eat dinner. In a rather haughty letter to me, later, Coral confirmed this visit and boasted that she always knew the whole thing was a hoax. But here is a very important point that you and all the others have mangled for years. Vero was behind the hoax, not Allende or anyone else. Jessup, Sanderson, Sanderson, myself, and everyone else knew that Allende had written the annotations. Allende admitted on many occasions to many people. One set of notations was written in his handwriting. The other set was probably written with his other hand and thus disguised. The introduction of the Vero document tried to make a bigger mystery out of the whole thing. The Vero secretary who typed the thing up is the perpetrator of the real hoax. Allende's letters to me, mostly mailed from Mexico, were clearly the work of a very unstable personality. For example, one 15-page letter begins with high praise, declaring that I was the best thing ever to happen to ufology, etc. But as the letter progressed, Allende argued with himself, and by the last page he was calling me names and telling me that he would never write to me again under any circumstances. You must realize that I have received thousands of truly crackpot letters over the years, and I'm something of an expert. Allende's letters confirmed my earlier conclusions that we were dealing with a rampantly schizoid personality. However, you must also realize that I could never state this in print because no editor would dare print it. The fear of a libel suit would be too great. Considering the man's mental state, I'm sure that his letters to Jessup were sincere, and that when he annotated Jessup's book and mailed it to the Naval Office, he thought that he was offering some valid information. He never expected it to snowball into a celebrated cause. Jessup suggested that the Navy throw the book into a wastebasket. Instead, they passed it on to the nest of UFO believers at Vero. Later, Allende presented himself at Vero and was given copies of the book. He sent me correspondence he had with Vero's president. He told them that he had written all the notations. Anyone who offers the true facts about the non-existent Philadelphia experiment will be shouted down as a pawn of the Air Force conspiracy. Like 90% of the UFO lore, there never was anything to it. But Carl Allen was not a conscious hoaxer. If anything, he is one of ufology's biggest victims. All the best, John A. Keel. I agree with most of what John Keel said in this letter, specifically that Mr. Allende was an unstable personality. If diagnosed, he may have been schizophrenic in nature. I believe Carlos Allende believed in what he wrote about because of his nature, but he was clearly a talented individual because he wrote the Philadelphia experiment, a story interesting enough to be repeated in many books and movies. There's a TV movie currently in production entitled The Philadelphia Experiment in 2012, and it is starring Malcolm McDowell. I look forward to see what they do with Mr. Allende's story. Carlos Allende died in March of 1994. In August of 1986, he offered a deathbed confession, 8 years before his death. In it, Mr. Allende alleges that Albert Einstein taught him about the physics of invisibility for 2.5 weeks. He continued to claim the story was real, and he offered new details that were clearly constructed by someone who had read everything anyone had ever written on the subject. He claimed it started out as an experiment in degaussing ships so they wouldn't attract mines. This was never mentioned in Mr. Allende's previous story, but it was mentioned later by ufologist Jacques Vallée. Vallée's response to the Philadelphia experiment was that it was no more than a misunderstanding of normal operations involving the degaussing of a ship. Degaussing involves a powerful electromagnetic generator which reduces the magnetic field of the ship, making it invisible to torpedoes and mines. Because degaussing was not common knowledge in 1943, someone witnessing it without knowing what it was could understandably think it was a secret experiment. On September 16, 1981, Carlos Allende wrote his father the following letter. In a handwritten letter dated September 16, 1981, Carlos Allende wrote his father the following. Dear Dad, the enclosed is my private personal property, and until I get back home, please save this along with my other papers and documents. The enclosed could win me the Copernicus Prize in astrophysics, a prize worth many thousands of dollars, but solely if this is saved, so that I myself can prove I wrote it. Sincerely your son, Carlos Miguel Allende. Carlos Allende wanted his legacy to be an extension of Einstein's unified field theory. He felt his notes were enough of a breakthrough to earn him an award in astrophysics. Mr. Allende clearly believed in the science behind his own science fiction. I would like to end this episode with an excerpt of the last Allende letter, dated May 25, 1956. Well, all this fantastically preposterous sort of rubbish will be necessary to feel that certain pull of curiosity about this thing that, to me, is irresistible. I want to crack this thing wide open. My reasons are simply to enable more work to be done upon this field theory. I missed this until recently. In the last Allende letter, Mr. Allende actually confesses that the story he's been telling is rubbish. He not only confesses that the story is fake, but he confesses why he is telling a fake story. Well, all this fantastically preposterous sort of rubbish will be necessary to feel that certain pull of curiosity about this thing that, to me, is irresistible. I want to crack this thing wide open. My reasons are simply to enable more work to be done upon this field theory. Mr. Allende wanted to build enough hype and buzz in the scientific community around the incomplete unified field theory that he would actually be solved. Mr. Allende wanted more than anything in the world to solve Einstein's incomplete unified field theory. He wanted the mystery to be solved. He thought that if we as a human race could solve the puzzle of the theory of everything, that we could have the technology of the stars, of invisibility, anti-gravity, teleportation, everything. Perhaps he was right. I'm John Hughston with Hoaxhunter. Be seeing you.